Look, with only a few days left till the election, we need to assume that everything that people who are supporting Trump need to know about Trump, they already know. They already know about Project 2025 because when you talk to them about it, they say, oh, but Trump says he's not going to enact that. Anytime you bring up a racist comment that he or one of his surrogates, they go, oh, but the whataboutism is phenomenal, right? But the reality is that there's nothing you're going to say that's going to change their mind. So I think at this point, we just call people out for what it is. We just call them out. It's just pure and deep desire have a society that has no diversity. I mean, you can call it racism, misogyny, bigotry, povertyism, which is a coin I termed, people who are dislike people who are poor, right? People can say it's a one issue, I'm a one issue voter. All of that is bullshit. They're not a one issue voter. They don't like things that are different than them. We need to call it out. Willful ignorance is not an option. It's a choice. And I think we need to be clear about this. The idea that, well, they just don't know, which is what I was using as an excuse. The reality is that I just don't think people want to know because they want to support these ideas that Donald Trump is espousing. They want to support that. They know what's going on in Project 2025 and they tell us, their anti-Trump family and friends, we all know Trump's not going to do. They want him to do it. And I think we need to call it out. They want those things. They want the Bible being taught in school. They want a Christian nation. Even if they're not Christian, there's some component of what he's offering, whether they consciously or subconsciously believe it. They want to be controlled and they want to live in a society where things are homogenized. They don't want to see Black Lives Matter on television and women talking about Harvey Weinstein and their issues, and they don't want people dealing with abortion. And even if that's not their issue, the fact of the matter is that there's something there that is feeding that mind. So I think that we need to call it out for what it is, and whatever it is, it's like they have to decide what it is and all of these various degrees of authoritarianism that they want, dictatorship. Fascism is not hitting. That word is not hitting with people. So I think we just need to call it what it is. And I think instead of trying to use the current events or the current facts, we just need to use history as a perfectly good example. And it's like, look, there's always going to be two sides. And sometimes you don't know what those sides are until they shake out, right? Until history reveals itself. But here's what we know looking back at history, starting at the Civil War. And because, by the way, side note, because Trump supporters talk so much about a civil war, more recently, it's been about a reckoning or a storm is coming. These are all things about where we're all going to go to war with each other, brother against brother, like we did in the Civil War. But because of equal rights, it's sister against sister too. We're all going to go to war together and it's all going to shake out. So, by the way, have you seen some of these Trump supporters? My God, they really think that they're going to survive a civil war? Oh my God. First of all, one of the things to win in war is you have to have critical thinking skills. Like that is how you outmaneuver people. So I think it's really, sad that they think that they're going to be on the right side of that. But the reality is that you look at the Civil War. At that time, you had the Union and you had the Confederate, right? And the people that were for freedom were Republicans. So I think it's really, and by the way, Republicans like to point that out. So let's point it out first. Hey, by the way, Republicans at that time were on the side of freedom, right? So this is a perfect example how it's not a party issue because these ideologies will grow anywhere that they're given space, right? It may be in 50 years, the Democrats that are down this path, right? It's wherever. It's not, let's say, racism and authoritarianism and wanting to be a dictator and wanting to control people. This is not a party issue. This is a human nature issue. And I don't know if I'm not a psychologist. Is it nurture? Is it nature? Is it, because you see it, in families. You have 4 kids. They're all brought up exactly the same way. And 2 are pro-freedom and two want an authoritarian dictator, right? And so I don't know why or how people, maybe, there's something in their brain that just makes them afraid, right? Because I think a lot of these things are built out of fear, or something in their brain that makes them think that they're just so much superior than everybody else, that they should be the ruling class, right? But I think what's important to do is point out the Civil War issue and say, look, we look back now, we know that one side was for freedom and one side wanted to enslave people, control people. And not just Black people, all people, right? I mean, like people who they thought were less than them. And when you look at the actual policies, that this is something we can agree on, because a lot of Trump supporters do understand that there is a book banning and they support it. When you are trying to put in place policy that will now no longer allow people to marry who they want to marry, or when you put laws in place to target a small group of people, this is government controlling people's lives. In an uber personal way, we should be expanding freedoms, not taking them away. When you put in government-forced childbirth, corporations getting tax cuts, but no social programs for poor people, then that is a country that is basically enslaving people in poverty. If there's no opportunity for people to move up, then that is a way to enslave people. When you put more rules and laws that somebody tries to get an abortion, they go to jail, now you're enslaving people into jail, right? And so these policies do not make a country strong. They make them weak. They make them easy to take over, which is really where we are right now. Either way, if we go one way or another way, it's like we could really see just the demise of democracy across the world. But at the end of the day, these are the things. If you're banning books, if you're for government forced childbirth, or even carrying a non-viable pregnancy to term and suffering through that, and then if you're for repealing any kind of like health care that helps people, these are things that enslave people, becoming destitute because there's no social programs or services. And so these are ways that we enslave people, and we keep them quiet. We keep them, when they're too poor, too broke, no opportunities, they fall in line, right? And that's just the God's honest truth. We're talking about it from a history standpoint. 20 years from now, if I look back at this moment, how is this moment going to compare to or be any different than like McCarthyism, right? Or when we had the Japanese internment camps, or when we had the Jim Crow laws? How is this time going to present itself as any different? These moments in history, right, that showed the ugly side of humanity. And so to me, if I look back, and I was even in this country, because we had so many Germans here that were trying to push Hitler's ideologies, and that's what Joseph McCarthy was working towards, which was to suppress the American people and to control them. And so when you think about would you go back now and have, knowing what you know, and have a barbecue with a Nazi? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but that's where I think we all have to make our own decisions. It's like, I cannot in good conscience at this moment in time continue down relationships with people. And even if they're willfully ignorant, because at this point, it's a choice. It's a choice. You made a choice to vote for Trump and not listen, because you have to, you're talking to them and they're just choosing not to believe you, or they're just choosing not to believe the media. So I think that we all have to make a decision. I think at this moment in time, we need to call it for what it is and start having different conversations with our friends and family. And you don't have to say, I'm never going to talk to you again, but you could say, I'm struggling with how I go forward in this relationship, because it's not about politics. It's not about policies. It's about a fundamental value system of who gets to be free and who doesn't, and who has rights and who doesn't. If you have children and you have daughters, you can use that as an excuse. I don't have children, but if you have children, you can use that. You are voting to strip my child's rights and opportunities away, and I cannot be a party to that. And I think that that's even your little boys, because the boys are going to, all of this is going to be a problem, right? Nobody's going to come out of this unscathed. And I think if you can make that argument, and not to change them, you do not want to change them. If they change on their own, then that's a miracle, but not to change them, but to be truthful and honest. I don't know how to go forward with this relationship. And you cite the Civil War because there are two sides to that. There's two sides to that Civil War. And then you work your way into it. You have two sides. And these are the signs that show that Iran is not for freedom. Book banning, government forced childbirth, taking away diversity programs. Those programs, let's be honest, women just had very little opportunities, right? And before the they really couldn't even get a divorce, right? They had to plead to a judge. And if they had children, it would be much harder, and they'd have to show that they could somehow support themselves. But it was very difficult to get a divorce before the no-fault divorce laws, the federal laws that actually are being challenged right now. Those are being challenged. So that'll go up to the Supreme Court, and all of these laws that affect our rights and freedom are making their way up the courts as we speak. Some of them have already got there, and we've seen them overturned, like Roe v. Wade and affirmative action, and many, many more. And the other thing I wanted to say, the last thing I'm going to say on this is don't get caught up in a cycle of trying to educate them anymore. Don't send them links. Just stop. Just stop. I mean, here's the thing. If they're really like a young person who's like doesn't really know what's going on and maybe wasn't going to vote, if you think there's a real opportunity to like have an open and honest dialogue, then, don't talk about policy. Talk about racial issues. Talk about why these things, talk about history. Talk about McCarthyism. Learn. Use AI. Use ChatGPT. Refresh yourself from like our days in high school, right? When we used to learn that stuff. So I think for me, that's the next step I'm taking. And I hope that we can all stand up and call people out and, just be honest and open about it and just say, look, let's just call a spade a spade. Let's just stop talking about policies and bullshit and all this other stuff. This is where we are. This is my line in the sand. All right. Talk to you later.